Projection is when we unconsciously take the parts of ourselves that we've deemed unacceptable, the parts we've pushed into our shadow, and we see them reflected in another person. We project onto other people what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. My name is Blum, and this is the Whole Soul Way. It's my signature program that I've been teaching for the past 4 years, and I decided to offer the foundation lessons, exercises, and tools for free on YouTube and all of the major podcast channels. Because I truly believe that the world needs more of us healed, whole, authentic, and awake. And you know what? I don't want to be a barrier to anyone getting the help that they need. And in fact, I really want to be part of the change. Each lesson builds on the last. So if this is your first time here, make sure that you start at the beginning. This is your invitation. Show up, do the work, and join the movement of souls who are committed to creating a better world, one inner transformation at a time. Let's dive in. We're talking about a search and rescue mission, but how do you actually do that, right? Well, the whole Wholesale Way program is focused on that, but let's just get a little bit more specific right now. So we've been talking about this concept of climbing a mountain. In step 2, if you recall, we identified some of the things that need to be rescued, or at least just started to talk about the concept of the shadow, the exile, lost, abandoned, and rejected parts of ourselves. Your feelings that were too much, your needs that were too demanding, the aspects of yourself that don't fit the cherished self that you created. So now in step 3, we started to talk about going to get those parts, seeing ourselves from a higher perspective. Think of your life, your healing, your wholeness, all of it as the mountain, as a mountain. And we're going to climb that mountain together, not to get away from yourself, but to find yourself, to rescue all of the parts of yourself that have been left behind on different trails at different points in your life. And this is that search and rescue mission. So each trigger in your life, each difficult emotion, each place where you feel stuck, these are all trailheads. They're invitations to climb your mountain on a different trail to find a different part of yourself that's been waiting for you. We leave no part behind. This is a complete search and rescue mission, even if it takes the rest of our lives. And here's what makes this step so powerful. As you climb your mountain, as you go deeper into yourself to find these parts, you're also rising higher. You're gaining perspective. You're seeing possibilities that you couldn't see from deep in the valley. You're starting to see yourself and your life from your soul's viewpoint, from your highest self's viewpoint. But here's the question. How do we even know where to look? How do we find what's been hidden in the shadows? The good news is that your shadow self has been leaving you clues all along, breadcrumbs, marking the trails back to these abandoned parts of yourself. So let's learn how we can read the map. The shadow's leaving these breadcrumbs everywhere, judgments, unfelt feelings, unmet needs, your avoided fears, the parts of yourself that you've worked so hard to hide. Each one of these is a trailhead and an invitation to climb your mountain and rescue another part. And we do this through a lot of our self-inquiry tools, the shoulds tool that we are using, the cherished self tool, judgments tools. When the next step, and we talk about the dialogue quadrant and the trigger trail buddy, these are ways that we are reclaiming aspects of ourselves. So I definitely want to encourage you to download the workbook if you haven't already, so that you can make sure that you are doing these self-inquiry tools as you go along. So as you can see, though, there isn't just one way to find your shadow. These abandoned parts reveal themselves through multiple pathways, multiple trailheads. So let's just talk about each one. The first one I want to talk about is projections and judgments. This is often the loudest trail marker. Say people who trigger you. I know that this isn't exactly what you want to hear, but they're showing you where to climb. Projection is when we unconsciously take the parts of ourselves that we've deemed unacceptable, the parts we've pushed into our shadow, and we see them reflected in another person. We project onto other people what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. There's a saying you've probably heard, you spot it, you got it. Or as another wise person put it, when you point one finger at another, three fingers point back at you. Our judgments of other people reveal more about us than about the person that we're judging. Now, the same goes the opposite too. So when someone judges you, it's generally more about them than it is about you. So it can sometimes help us to free ourselves a bit from this idea that another person's opinion of us is really any of our business. Because even when we judge another person, we're so sure that that other person is bad. And the actual truth is, maybe they are. I don't really know. But we can't see clearly until we have gone inside and looked at the ways we might be projecting our own shadows onto them. So, where do we look for things like that? Well, if someone triggers you, if someone makes you kind of cringe or squirm or feel irritated, maybe someone that you obsessively admire or envy, that's when we could find our golden shadow. And maybe it's things like qualities that you think, I could never be that way. I will never do that. Or you're rigidly, I'm never selfish. I'm not needy. I don't do drama. When you have a visceral reaction to someone else, that strong judgment, that irritation that won't let go, that envy that makes you feel small, it's usually a trailhead. It's your psyche saying, it's like this pointing like, climb over here. There's a part of you waiting on this trail. And that's not to say that you won't eventually do the work and say, hey, I also don't like that that person's showing up that way and set a boundary. I'm not trying to say that this makes us tolerate bad behavior from other people, but it makes us perhaps not be as activated by other people and to accept people. Yeah, they're that way. And I'm also maybe going to set a boundary that I don't want that person to either be in my life anymore or I'm going to remove myself when that person's acting that way. So, just to be clear, trailhead number two is your unfelt feelings. Some parts of yourself are hidden in feelings that you've never allowed yourself to feel. Maybe you've learned that anger is bad and you've swallowed that down, or sadness is not safe, so you stayed busy instead. Maybe joy felt like too much. Maybe you just muted your excitement so that you didn't have to feel that feeling. These unfelt feelings, they don't disappear, they accumulate. They wait for you on the mountain. So we might look at emotions we avoid or suppress. Sometimes it's hard because what I have found is that the more safety we build by reparenting our inner child, by holding ourselves and loving ourselves and caring about ourselves, then sometimes our emotions are more willing to show themselves. Sometimes we find our emotions in our inner child as we journal and as we open up to a relationship with that part of ourselves. Sometimes it just happens. We start to reveal them. Maybe it's when you have feelings that are uncomfortable when other people express them. Like if someone's sad and you just really have a hard time being with them, or if someone's angry and you have a hard time being with them. Maybe it's something that you notice that you do as a pattern to numb from your emotions, like eat sugar, or maybe it's to go for a run. And there are things that you're like, huh, I just did have that big thing happen to me, and I never really felt my feelings. I instead numbed them. And maybe it's feelings that you know that you learned were too much or unacceptable as a child. Every unfelt feeling is a part of you waiting to be acknowledged and held and brought back home. And a lot of this is happening as we meet our inner child and get to know her beyond our defensive patterns. Which brings us to trailhead number three, which is our unmet childhood needs. Oftentimes our emotional needs, but they could be other needs as well. So many parts of your shadow are connected to needs that were never met when you were young. Maybe you needed to be seen, but you felt super invisible. Maybe you needed comfort, but you had to be strong, tough. Nobody really saw that you were going through something. Maybe you needed to play and be silly, but you had to grow up way too fast. And those unmet needs, they don't just go away. They went into your shadow. And now, as an adult, they show up in unexpected ways. Maybe it's in ways that you expect other people to do things for you, or you're always disappointed because your husband just can't be there for you in the ways that you need him to be. Or maybe it's in the suppressed needs that you have, or the ways you abandon yourself. All kinds of patterns can sometimes reveal what our unmet childhood needs are. So maybe you can find these by looking at what, as a child, didn't you get? What needs didn't you get met? It might also be needs that you judge in other people. So if you see someone who always is attention seeking, you're just like, oh my God, that person is such an attention seeker. But you're like, yeah, but deep down inside, you're just a little jealous. You wish you were getting that much attention. Or maybe you judge people who are good at accepting comfort from other people or being protected. And you think, I don't want any of that. I don't need comfort or protection. But then deep down inside, you do. and you desire it. And maybe it's something where you feel empty or like something is missing or something you long for, but you tell yourself you shouldn't need it. Like you shouldn't need that. These unmet needs are part of yourself that are waiting to be cared for. But here's the thing, we think it's by someone else, but actually, these are needs now that need to be met by us through reparenting our inner child. Number 4 is our avoided fears, the fears that we don't want to face. Fear is one of the most common residents of the shadow. The fears that we couldn't face as children, maybe we learned that they were shameful, maybe that they made us weak. These things went underground, but like everything else, they don't disappear. They're there, and they are actually running parts of your life from behind the curtain. So, what are we looking for? What we're looking for here are ways that we're afraid to admit that we're afraid. Like they're things that we just go tough on them. We're toughen up. We are strong. We can handle this. Maybe it's fears that we judge in other people, or maybe places that we avoid or procrastinate or stay stuck. Maybe that reveals a fear of success or a fear of failure or a fear of getting it wrong. And a question you can ask yourself is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Sometimes that's a way to reveal, wait, but I'm not afraid. And then we say, maybe I am afraid. Your fears aren't the enemy. Just like every other protector part, they've been working overtime and they're waiting for us to climb the trail and let them know. Adult us, who we're going to talk more about in step 5, the adult us. I see you. I've got this now. You can rest. Sometimes we have to face our fears in order to make a choice to not live in fear. Trailhead number 5, your cherished self's opposite. Remember when we did the cherished self exercise in step 2? The identity that we cling to, the opposite of the identity that's almost always in the shadow. And we did that exercise about the opposites. That's a great place to find parts of ourselves. If your cherished self is that I'm always generous, then the part of us that wants to receive would be in your shadow. The part of us that sometimes feels selfish could be in the shadow. If your cherished self is I'm strong and independent, then maybe in the shadows there's a part of you that is a little needy and wishes that other people would notice that you need help sometimes too. If your cherished self is the peacemaker, then maybe there's a part with that righteous anger that's in your shadow, or even the part that just knows that something is wrong and a boundary's been crossed and you want to say no. That's a part in your shadow too. So, where do we look for the cherished self opposite? Well, I would say doing the cherished self exercise. What's the identity you cling mostly to? And then what's the opposite of that identity? I would also say that you can ask yourself some questions like, what would happen if you weren't always that way? What if you brought in a little more balance? And kind of along the same lines would be, what parts of you threaten the image that you built? The opposite of your cherished self isn't your enemy. Just like all of your inner protector parts, it's just another aspect of you, and it's your wholeness that's waiting to be integrated. So we want to thank that part. We need to thank these pieces of ourselves because they're the ones that are raising their hand and pointing to trailheads and getting our attention so we can finally live in wholeness. Hey there, Deb here. Just one quick interruption. If you've been diving into the Whole Soul Way round 1, the foundation and core lessons, and you're finding that it's really resonating with you, that is amazing. Now, some of you will get so much out of this free content, and that will be enough. But if you ever feel called to take it deeper, or you think you'd like a little bit more support, just know that there is a whole journey waiting for you inside our full program. Joining the full Whole Soul Way container means that you'll be part of a community. Not just any community, a community of people who are incredibly committed to their journey, who are engaged, empathetic, and so inspiring. And this community and my leadership means that you get more support and contextualization to your own life. Also, you'll have access to rounds 2 and 3 and future rounds that I create, where we take what you've learned in the foundations and then practice applying it to the nuance of our lives. We experience deeper embodiment of the healing, and it really allows us to step more fully into this way of living. This is really where the deeper transformation unfolds when you have the support you need, community, in a container that's really sacred and safe. So if this is speaking to you, I definitely would say check out the full program and see if and how we could support your growth on an even deeper level. You can check it out at thewholesomeway.com/program. Okay, let's get back to it. Now, last but not least, and by the way, there are way more trailheads. These are just some examples, is trailhead number 6, which is your shame and resistance. Sometimes the loudest clue makes your skin crawl. The labels that feel absolutely not me, the parts you defend against most fiercely, that resistance, that shame, that's a neon sign that's pointing to shadow material. So when you hear a label that makes you feel defensive or reactive, pay attention. If there are places and parts of you or of humanity, of human beings that you either just quickly deny or you're just repulsed by, that's probably a shadow part. What aspects of your personality or your past do you hide from others? Or even from yourself? Parts that you're like, the past is the past. I don't want to look at that. Or I used to be that way, but I'm not that way anymore because I now am a good person. I don't do that anymore. What would you be mortified for people to know about you? Now, again, these parts that you're ashamed of, they're not the parts that you need to go reveal to everybody in the world. But what you do need to do is bring your own compassion and love and care to those parts and welcome them in to get to know them so that you don't perpetuate the wounds of rejection. So let's talk about what happens when we find these parts. Finding our parts is a great first step. And oftentimes things start to unravel a little bit just by being willing to look at them. It's happened to me before. I have had shadow parts that have actually just integrated themselves just by seeing them, just by honoring and acknowledging them. But sometimes we have to do a little bit more work. And I'm just going to give you a really rough overview because really the work is every step along the 6 steps. But we're just going to talk about giving you a little bit of a sense at this stage in the game what you can do. In the next step, you're going to get some tools. So you're going to be able to use the dialogue quadrant or the trigger trail buddy, which will walk you through a lot more detailed of a process. And then we're going to learn more about the actual act of reparenting ourselves and then showing up differently in the world the whole soul way. But right now, let's just talk about what you could do. So this is where you learn to become your own parent, your own best friend, your own leader. So as you know, we're not going to rescue these parts by judging them or fixing them or trying to make them go away. We rescue them by showing compassion, having curiosity, sharing the love that they've been longing for, literally collecting them, helping them to get their needs met in that moment, and then taking them back home, just like if you were on a real search and rescue mission. So when you find a shadow part, the first thing that you really need to do is say, I see you. You're here. I got you. I'm with you. Welcome it. You don't have to love this part yet, okay? You just want to say to that part, you don't need to hide anymore. You're welcome here. I may have some resistance to you and some emotions and feelings around you, but you're welcome here. And then get curious. What do you need? What have you been trying to protect me from? What have you been carrying? Because you've been carrying a lot by keeping this in the shadows. Maybe it's time to offer a little compassion. Like, I'm just so sorry that you've had to be alone with this. I am here now and I've got you. And create some safety that you're not too much, you're not unacceptable, and you do belong. This is some of the most important work we can do around parenting ourselves because it's not just understanding it conceptually, but actually learning to show up for these parts of ourselves, these oftentimes wounded, abandoned, exiled, disowned parts of ourselves that have been alone for a very, very long time. And we can show up with the nurturance and the presence and at least unconditional positive regard, maybe eventually unconditional acceptance and love that they've been waiting for. In step 5, we're going to get a lot more into what this looks like to be able to parent ourselves. You're learning to create deeper inner safety, the kind of safety that says, I've got you, you don't have to hide, you're welcome here. And that's oftentimes new for us. Let's talk about the power of the drop. There's a whole video about this, but let's just talk about this concept. You don't have to become what you judge. You don't have to act out every impulse of your shadow. But what if you just allowed a drop? Imagine that there's this imbalance. Maybe you're always selfless over here, and then you are saying, I don't want to be selfish. But a drop of selfishness might help you to set a boundary or stand up for yourself. Do you remember the woman we talked about that got a little bit of a backbone? It's just a drop. If you're always busy and productive over here, and you have this other side over here, which is a sloth, someone who's just lazy and does nothing, maybe one drop of laziness will allow you to enjoy rest without guilt. Maybe you're this extremely respectful person, and over here you're saying, I never want to be disrespectful. Maybe one drop of disrespect will give you the backbone to say what needs to be said. This is a delicious middle space. You're not denying anything. You're also not becoming anything in particular. You're freeing up this enormous energy that was spent on rigidly not being something. And in that liberation, you find the sweet spot that is called wholeness. You find a place where, depending on the situation, you dance in the middle. Sometimes you're a little bit more on the respectful side. Sometimes maybe you're saying what needs to be said and you're a little afraid and cringing you're being disrespectful. But it's dancing in the middle instead of having a rigid polarity on one side or the other. Remember what Debbie Ford said, the shadow work pioneer. Embracing our dark side gives us a newfound freedom to be with the darkness in others. For when I can love all of me, I will love all of you. Reclaiming our shadow is the path to greater peace and love in our relationships, in our communities, in the world. Shadow work is the path to compassion and peace, not just with yourself, not just in your intimate relationships, but with the entire world. Because when you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you can stop projecting judgment onto others. When you meet your own humanity with tenderness, you can hold space for others' humanity too. When you integrate your shadow, you become whole. And wholeness, well, that's where true peace lives. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your shadow, whether you acknowledge it or not, is running the show. It's pulling the strings. It's directing your life from behind the curtain. But when you climb your mountain and you rescue those parts, and when you bring them home with compassion, that's when you become free. That's when you get to choose how you show up in the world. That's when you step in the role of leader in your own life. So the work we're doing here is to welcome every trailhead, follow every breadcrumb, climb every trail on your mountain. Because each trigger, every difficult emotion, each place where you feel stuck, they're not obstacles, they're invitations. Well, they are obstacles, but the obstacle is the way. They're showing you exactly where to climb to find another part of yourself. Remember, we don't leave any part behind. This is a complete search and rescue mission. And as you climb, you rise, you gain perspective, you start to see yourself from your soul's viewpoint, from your highest self's viewpoint. You become whole. So let's do it.